Hi there, it's Llarold, and today I'm going to talk about how to play Brewmaster Monk in Mythic Plus in Dragonflight Patch 10.1.5. Now, I just put out a video about monks in patch 10.1.5 like 3 weeks ago, and I think I even said something along the lines of, if anything changes, I'll make an update. Obviously, this video is evidence that I think enough has changed in the last month that the update is necessary. At the time that I put that video out, a few people at the highest level of key pushing had started experimenting with using Press the Advantage in Mythic Plus. I wasn't really sold on it for anything below super high level keys. We're talking like plus 28s. I did feel like playing around with it over the next couple of weeks though, and seeing how much of an impact it could make in mid-level keys. We're talking stuff in the 16 to 22 range. Is it worth running instead of Weapons of Order? Is the constant small damage bonus from Press the Advantage worth sacrificing the large burst damage bonus from Weapons of Order? At the time I thought it wasn't. Now I do, and the community agrees. About 75 to 80% of players doing high level keys are running Press the Advantage instead of Weapons of Order. Now there was a nerf to Monk about a week ago. Keg Smash had its damage reduced by 5% and Spinning Crane Kick damage was reduced by 20%. But even after that nerf, I am consistently dealing freakish amounts of damage in Mythic Plus on Monk, ever since making this talent and playstyle swap. The difference in total damage in Sims isn't huge, and it actually puts Press the Advantage as the weaker option, but in practice I'm finding that Press the Advantage is far preferable in Mythic Plus, and I think this is true at every level, and not just the highest end. So in the interest of keeping this short and to the point, I'm just going to go over what's different about the spec, how to play Press the Advantage in Mythic Plus, and that's pretty much it. If you want more detail, you want to know about how to play Monk in Raid, you want to know about specific talents, that sort of thing, you can check out our previous guide on how to play Brewmaster Monk in patch 10.1.5. It's exhaustive, and it was exhausting to make. So let's start with what's just changed in the Mythic Plus talent setup. The most obvious change is Press the Advantage. It's obviously replacing Weapons of Order in that choice node. That's basically it for all that changes in the right-hand tree. I did try playing around with a couple of other talents, most notably Chi Surge, which requires dropping that single point in high tolerance. This is a trade-off of about 2% stagger value and roughly 3% haste, which is kind of a decent-sized defensive sacrifice. In testing, I found that Chi Surge added quite a bit less than 1% more damage, which is extremely terrible for a talent point deep in the tree, like at the very bottom of the tree. And I definitely would not recommend Chi Surge for any circumstances. The trade-off is not worth it, literally at all. You actually would get a lot more damage out of taking Blackout Combo and using Blackout Combo on all of your Breath of Fire and Keg Smash casts. The Breath of Fire Blackout Combo adds a ton of damage and 5% damage reduction. That's great. The Keg Smash Blackout Combo only adds 2 more seconds of brew cooldown reduction, but that's pretty good defensively. It gets your Bone Dust Brew back off a cooldown faster. It's good. This is the optimal way to play. It's stronger than running a single point in high tolerance in literally all scenarios. It is the difference between offering you a $2 loan or $5 for free. But when you look at breakdowns of talent usages, 5% of players doing high-level Mythic Plus run Blackout Combo, the stronger talent, and the other 95% use High Tolerance, despite it being undeniably weaker in literally all possible situations. So why? Blackout Combo is annoying, especially in Mythic Plus. You're in and out of melee range a lot, you just kinda don't want to have to track and deal with that buff. That's it. Blackout Combo is better, there is no question. No one should disagree with this, but the difference is small enough that the convenience of High Tolerance makes it more appealing. 95% of players agree. Now, because Press the Advantage is a damage proc and a damage buff that's based on auto attack swings, there's another concern. What about two-handed weapons versus dual wielding? Does using a two-handed weapon mean you can't use this? Previously, that was the idea. I don't really feel that way anymore. I've been using it while two-handing, it's still great. Dual wielding is undeniably better. You get to run 2 enchants, you get 33% more procs to Press the Advantage, and using 2 enchants means you can put Sophic Devotion on one hand and Shadow Flame Wreath on the other. That's ideal. I would just try to swap to dual wielding sooner rather than later, and still use Press the Advantage in Mythic Plus if I had a two-hander, just to get a better level of familiarity with the simpler playstyle so that I'm ready to go once I get better weapons. There is one exception here, and that's Llarold, Pillar of the Elder Flame. It's the weapon that comes from Rashok and Aberrus, and it is the best in slot weapon for monks. I have a Mythic one at 450 item level, and it's better than any two one-handed weapons available in the game due to its extremely powerful on-use damage effect. Llarold is pretty amazing, and it really outperforms both its item level and the two-handed weapon limitation that it imposes. Using press the advantage with a two-hander is fine. Dual wielding is generally better unless it's Llarold, in which case Llarold is just better. There are two other talents in the left-hand tree that I've played around with and definitely need to talk about before moving on. Dance of the Wind is the first talent I want to point out, and it's a choice node with Dampen Harm. I initially thought this could maybe see some minimal use, but that it wouldn't really be a great choice. I was just dead wrong on this one. If you look at a log of a typical Brewmaster Monk in Mythic Plus who's using Dampen Harm, they'll dodge roughly 50% of auto attacks. And then they take about 70 to 80% of their damage from auto attacks. You have to filter out stagger damage, since stagger is just a reflection of all the other damage that you've taken. But once you do, that's a pretty typical breakdown, and it's about 75% auto attacks with an average dodge chance of 50%. Dance of the Wind is additive. It interacts nicely with all your dodge chance from mastery, and it's worth a nice clean 10% chance to dodge. So by taking Dance of the Wind, you give up Dampen Harm, which is a good defensive cooldown. But you take 20% fewer auto attacks, and when you consider that auto attacks are a good 75% of the damage you take on average, that's worth about 15% damage reduction, total, as a completely passive bonus. With apologies to Dampen Harm, it's just not that good. But wait, there's more. Dodging triggers Counter-Strike and your tier set 4-piece bonus, both of which add a ton of damage to Spinning Crane Kick, which is still one of your main sources of damage. This is the reward just for dodging, which you get more of from Dance of the Wind. This makes Dance of the Wind a must-have, a completely undervalued talent that adds a huge amount of damage reduction and damage output and is completely passive. You don't even have to be at your computer for it to function at full value. Compare that to Dampen Harm's purely defensive value on a relatively short window compared to its cooldown, and there is no comparison. I like Dampen Harm. Losing it means you do have to make more of an effort to time your Celestial Brews effectively to counteract boss attacks and just big bursts of damage. This is especially true for tank busters, but for magic tank busters, Celestial Brew is really good, and you still have diffuse magic. For physical tank busters, you have stagger. Physical tank busters have never really been threatening to monks. Now let's move on to diffuse magic and Yu'lon's Grace. This is another choice node that I felt a little conservative toward, but again, I think that the new passive option is generally just the much better choice in the vast majority of situations. Diffuse magic has the same issue as Dampen Harm. It's a great defensive cooldown, but it has a super short duration and a moderately long cooldown. It's really good at mitigating bursts of spell damage, and the Dispel effect is very useful in a very small handful of situations. But there's really only two places in this season of Mythic Plus where I feel like I need to have diffuse magic. The first is Neltharion's Lair on Tyrannical Week. Dargrul, the final boss, has a tank buster named Molten Crash, and it deals a preposterous amount of damage on Tyrannical Weeks. At the start of the fight, or shortly after the start of the fight, he'll cast it 3 times in relatively quick succession, about 13 to 15 seconds in between each of his first 3 casts. Then after that, the fight timings change a bit, and he takes about 30 seconds in between each cast. This means that after that initial blast, you'll have Celestial Brew up for basically every single one. But you don't for the first 3 hits. You have it for the first hit and the third hit, and then for the second hit, you gotta have something else. You either need to have Diffuse Magic or Fortifying Brew in order to survive that hit, and Diffuse is way more effective than Fortifying Brew for this mechanic. It fits perfectly in, mitigates one big hit, and then you can just generally ride Celestial Brew for the rest of the fight. The other notable spot where I feel like I really need Diffuse Magic is the trash packs before Harlan Sweet. In Freehold, the Iron-Tide officers have an ability called Oiled Blade, which deals a pretty big chunk of fire damage, but more importantly puts an 8-second 75% Mortal Strike effect on you. It's dispellable, but if your healer isn't quick to dispel, there's a very real chance that they cast Oiled Blade on you and then you just die if it's a fortified week. Diffuse Magic is super helpful in this situation because you can dispel that horrible debuff if your healer is a little slow, or if it's an afflicted week and oh no, I just dispelled the mobs and now I can't prevent you from dying. Those two examples aside, I think Llarold's Grace is generally way more useful than Diffuse Magic in Mythic Plus. It's a steady source of shielding against magic damage, which has always troubled Brewmaster Monks, and it adds up to a lot of healing by the end of a run. Again, you're trading burst defensive value, which is great in very specific situations, for generic, always useful damage reduction that's useful everywhere, including the specific situations where Diffuse Magic would be excellent. So in general, I would always use Press the Advantage and Dance of the Wind in Mythic Plus now, like virtually always. Llarold's Grace is great, and I will continue to use it 90% of the time, but there are a couple of spots where I think Diffuse Magic could be worth taking for the specific value, even though it's a pretty large overall defensive sacrifice. Now let's talk about how to use Press the Advantage in Mythic Plus. Rotationally speaking. First off, you still just want to use all your cooldowns and your rotational abilities that have cooldowns as much as you can. You know, we're talking Exploding Keg and Bone Dust Brew and Summon White Tiger Statue and Invoke Nujal. All of that stuff, you're still trying to use it as much as you can. Use it or lose it. You want to keep Blackout Kick, Keg Smash, Rising Sun Kick, and Breath of Fire on cooldown. You want to maintain Rushing Jade Wind, and you want to fill any remaining empty spots in your rotation with Spinning Crane Kick. Using Breath of Fire regularly is important because it applies the Charred Passions buff, which gives you an extra 50% damage with your Blackout Kick and Spinning Crane Kick, and that acts as a multiplier on top of all of the other damage bonuses that you get for Spinning Crane Kick, which you have several. So maximizing Charred Passions uptime by hitting Breath of Fire regularly is really important for maximizing your total damage output. Spinning Crane Kick does prevent auto-attacking, and that is a bit at odds with Press the Advantage, and that caused some confusion, I mean, even for me, early on in the patch. But it's okay, using Spinning Crane Kick is fine. You're still benefiting from the stacking damage of Press the Advantage when you're using Spinning Crane Kick, and you're spending 90-ish% of your globals not casting Spinning Crane Kick, so you're still getting very good value out of Press the Advantage, even if you use Spinning Crane Kick as a filler as much as you can. As for how you should use your 10-stack Press the Advantage buffs, it's fairly simple. If you're in AoE, you use them on Keg Smash. If you're in single target, you use them on Rising Sun Kick. You want to use them quickly, which can mean sitting on a Rising Sun Kick or a Keg Smash for a couple of seconds, but it's more important to make sure that you're using them on the right skill. So if you have to hold Rising Sun Kick or Keg Smash a bit to wait for a cooldown, that's okay. You can fill the time with Blackout Kick, Breath of Fire, Rushing Jade Wind, or Spinning Crane Kick. Using offensive and defensive cooldowns in this setup is way easier because you don't have nearly as many of them, you just have passive bonuses instead. You want to use Exploding Keg as much as you can. Ideally, you want to have Bone Dust Brew active beforehand, but that's basically all the setup you really need now. You don't have to stack Weapons of Order 4 times. You just get in there, get your skills going, get Bone Dust Brew up, try to have a few Press the Advantage stacks, and then let that keg explode. Hit Spinning Crane Kick 2 times afterward to maximize the damage, and then continue your regular rotation. Similarly, in terms of major defensive cooldowns, you have Fortifying Brew, and then that's basically it. You use it when you're going to take a lot of damage or at the start of big pulls. If you have a big predictable hit, like Molten Crash from Dargrul, you can try to Zen Meditation it, but that's basically just for big predictable single hits. And other than that, you have Celestial Brew to mitigate big hits from bosses, or to protect your health bar at any point when you take a lot of damage and your health drops low. Similarly, you want to use Purifying Brew anytime that your health drops low to reduce the amount of stagger damage that you're taking, and also hit Expel Harm so that you can heal back up. Pretty much it. I mentioned enchants earlier, but I'll just reiterate as we move into stats. You really want Sophic Devotion for Mythic Plus. I'm using Shadow Flame Wreath on my own weapon because it's better for single target raid damage, I only have the one weapon, and I don't want to swap my enchant back and forth every week, but it is suboptimal for Mythic Plus. If I was dual wielding, then I would use Sophic and Shadow Flame as my 2 enchants. In general, you want to enchant and gem for versatility, and then crit becomes your second best secondary stat. It's very close though. In general, maximizing your item level is much more important than optimizing your secondary stats. Agility is very valuable. You want to get as much of it as you can, and you get that by just getting your item level up. Despite using Press the Advantage, haste is really not all that great now. It's fine, it's not a dead stat like it was before using Press the Advantage, but it's not something you want to actively seek out either. It just hurts a little less when you have it on a piece of gear. Okay, this represents a pretty large change for Brewmaster Monk and Mythic Plus. It's a significant reduction in complexity, but it doesn't come at the expense of being able to deal a lot of damage. If anything, I think it's the opposite. You lose a powerful, but awkward offensive cooldown and gain an extremely consistent, but also pretty large damage bonus. Additionally, by dropping one or both of your optional defensive cooldowns, you gain huge increases in your passive damage reduction, and that has cascading bonuses to your damage output as well. Basically, the future is now. Brewmaster Monk has gotten easier to play again, and it even got stronger while that was happening. I'm pretty happy about it. I've really been enjoying Monk a lot lately. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.